In Chapter 13, we're looking at our third type of industry, that's monopolistic competition. Monopolistic competition is very similar to pure competition, but we have a little bit of monopoly power thrown in. And this is a very common industry. Much of what you buy falls into this category, for instance, most food and clothing. We'll start by looking at the characteristics of this type of industry. Then we're going to be calculating the industry concentration ratios. We'll look at how a firm in monopolistic competition determines their price and output, and we will also be calculating profit. And then we'll look at the efficiency. So how efficient is this type of industry? And we'll compare that to pure competition and monopolies. And then we'll talk about product variety, which is something that's unique to this type of industry. In monopolistic competition, we'll see a large number of sellers like we did in pure competition. So think 25 to 70 here. So each of the sellers have a small market share and they don't work together. There's no collusion. We'll actually talk about that in the next chapter. So each of the sellers are independent. We will also see product differentiation. That means that they do not sell identical products. Instead, we're going to see variations in the products at each of the firms. So they may be different products, slightly different types of products. It may be a different location, different service qualities, brand names, or packaging. That means that each firm will be selling a product with many very close substitutes. These firms are considered price makers. That means that they have some control over price, not nearly as much as in monopoly. They'll actually only have just a little bit of control over price. So they can bump the price up just a little or lower the price just a little. We'll also see easy entry and exit here. It's very easy to start a business in this type of industry. Just get a business loan and you can get set up. We will also see non-price competition like advertising or trademarks, and they do this to make price less of a factor and make their product differentiation a greater factor. Because the more important that product differentiation is, the more control that they have over price. And the more control they have over price means that they can have a higher profit. Now we're going to look at industry concentration. So there's two different ways that we can calculate this, and it will help us to determine if the firm is in which of the four different types of industries. So are they in pure competition? Are they in monopolistic competition? Are they in oligopoly, or is it a monopoly? So for each of these, the higher number that we get, that would mean the industry is more concentrated, which means it's less competitive. It's more like a monopoly. So the higher numbers will be more like a monopoly. The first one is the four-firm concentration ratio. What they will give you is the percentage of sales of all of the firms in the market. You look at the top four largest firms and you add together their percent of the output. So for instance, if there's a monopoly, there's only one firm, that means they have 100% of the market. So the four-firm concentration ratio for a monopoly is 100%. That's the strongest industry concentration, and 100 is the highest number we can get. If we had an oligopoly, that would mean there's only a few large firms. For instance, if there were 5 firms in the market and they were all the same size, each of them would have 20% of the market. We would look at the top 4 and add together those 4 firms 20%, and we would get a number of 80. So 80 tells us that's a lot of industry concentration. Anything more than 40% would be considered an oligopoly. Anything less than 40% would fall into this category of monopolistic competition. And the closer we get to 0, the closer we're getting to pure competition. So those industries that are like pure competition are going to have very, very low numbers, maybe less than 10%. The Herfindahl index is another way that we can calculate industry concentration. What we do here is we take all of the firms, not only the top 4, but all firms, and we square their percent of the sales, so their market share, and then we add all the numbers together. So if we had a monopoly and we only had one firm with 100% of the market, we would take the 100%, we would square it, we would get a Herfindahl index for a monopoly of 10,000. And that's the highest possible number that we can get. If we had the oligopoly I was talking about earlier, where we had 5 firms and each of them had 20% of the market, you would take 20 squared plus 20 squared for all 5 of them and then add them up. That would give you a Herfindahl index of 2,000. So oligopolies tend to be in the thousands. Monopolistic competition tends to be in the 100s. And again, the closer that we get to 0, the more likely it is perfect competition. So here we're looking at some examples in monopolistic competition. So jewelry, there's many different sellers, and all the sellers sell a product that's slightly different. That's the main way you can tell if you're in monopolistic competition. Many sellers, and all the sellers sell something a little bit different. Notice their 4-firm concentration ratio is going to be below 40%, and their Herfindahl index tends to be in the 100s. So we still have, the numbers are falling as you go down the chart. When we get to the bottom, we have our retail bakeries. So these are the most like perfect competition. We have very low 4-firm concentration ratios and Herfindahl index. So we have very many sellers here. And their products are not that different from each other. So if you think like donut shops, the donuts are almost identical. A lot of times you're just going to go to the closest one that's available. And their prices are all about even as well. So retail bakeries, they're monopolistic competition, but they're the most similar to pure competition. So here's an example for you to try. We have a small town with 7 coffee shops, and it gives you the market shares of each of the 7 coffee shops. Calculate the 4-firm concentration ratio, and then calculate the Herfindahl index. So pause the video here. For the 4-firm concentration ratio, you're just going to look at the 4 largest firms, and these are already sorted for us, so that makes it easy, and add up the 4 largest firms. So 29 plus 25 plus 22 plus 11, and that would give you 87 for your answer. So this is sometimes written as a percentage, so you'll insert your answer as 87%, but just pay attention to what the homework is asking. A lot of times when we look at the chart of numbers and we're comparing the 4-firm concentration ratios for different industries, they do not put the percentage sign on there. So just pay attention. Okay, now the Herfindahl index. So with the Herfindahl index, what we're going to do is we're going to square each of these numbers, and then we add them up together. The biggest mistake I see on this is that people only take the first 4, but remember that's for the 4-firm concentration ratio. For the Herfindahl index, you need all of them. So take each of the numbers, square them, and then add up all your answers, and you'll get 2136. And you can tell from the answers that we got, the 87 and the 2136, that this industry is an oligopoly. For each type of industry, we've also looked at what the demand curve looks like. The demand curve in monopolistic competition is highly elastic. What that means is it's almost completely flat. It's still downward sloping, but it's very flat. Remember, in perfect competition, it was a horizontal line. That would be perfectly elastic. In monopolistic competition, in this one, it will be very flat because they have many close substitutes. In Monopoly, we had the steepest demand curve. That's because they have the entire market demand curve, and it would be the least elastic. The next thing we're going to do is find how to maximize profit in this type of industry. Now, the easy thing is exactly like we learned in the last chapter with Monopoly. So they're going to look first for the point where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. That will give the quantity, and then you move straight up to the demand curve to get your price. And you can calculate profit the same way. So that's similar to the Monopoly. In the long run, though, monopolistic competition will be similar to pure competition in that because there's entry and exit, easy entry and exit in the market, in the long run, this type of industry will always earn a normal profit. Remember, normal profit means economic profit will be 0. So in the long run, they have easy entry and exit, and economic profit will be 0. So let's look first at how they determine price, quantity, and profit from the graph. And like I said, this is exactly like what we did last chapter with a monopoly. So the first thing to maximize profit, they want to find the point where marginal revenue hits marginal cost, which is right here. That will give the quantity amount. To find price, move straight up to the demand curve. So here's where we hit the demand curve. That will give us a price of P1. Your next step is to calculate profit. You can do that with the profit equation we were using before, which is equal to price minus average total cost, and then multiply by quantity. So you'll move either up or down to wherever the average total cost curve is. In this case, our average total cost is lower. That means that there will be economic profit. So here they're going to be making positive economic profit. Now, what's new with this type of industry compared to with the monopoly is that when there's economic profit to be made, it's going to cause more firms to enter this market. So positive economic profit means more firms will enter. Now remember, they don't have the entire demand curve. They're actually sharing this demand curve with all of the other industries. So this demand curve right here is just their portion of the total market demand. If more firms enter, it means they have to share the total demand with more firms. So they're going to get a smaller piece of it. So what will happen is this demand curve right here will become smaller. It's going to shift down or shift to the left. When that happens, this whole thing will shift a little bit down, a little bit to the left, and that's going to cut into their profits. So their price will not be as high and their profit will be lower as well. So the demand curve, when firms enter, because there's profit, will shift down into the left like I drew right here. There's also a possibility in the short run that the firm will run a loss. So for a loss, they're going to still find the point where marginal cost equals marginal revenue, which is right here, move up to the demand curve to find the price, and then if we compare this price right here to average total cost, it will tell us if they're making a profit or a loss. You can also use the formula to calculate the actual amount. So in this case, average total cost is higher than the price. That means that the firm is making a loss. If the firms in this industry are making a loss, in the long run, some of the firms will exit the industry. As some firms exit the industry, the remaining firms will be sharing the total demand with less people. So they're going to get a little bit more demand than they had before. And that's going to shift this demand curve up and to the right. So the demand curve may shift and look something like this. So remember, when in monopolistic competition, when the firms are making a loss, it means that some firms will exit and the demand curve will shift to the right. In the long run, after all the firms either enter or exit, depending on the profit or loss, all of the remaining firms will be making a normal profit, which is an economic profit of 0. And this is what we're seeing in the graph right here. So as we determine their profit maximizing position, we look for the marginal revenue equals marginal cost, which is right here. Move up to the demand curve to find the price. And now let's see what happened to the profit. Well, at this point right here, notice they're touching the average total cost curve, which means the price and the average total cost are equal to each other. When this condition is true, when price is equal to average total cost, it means that profit will be 0. So you want to remember the long run equilibrium condition is where price equals ATC and profit is 0. It's very similar to what we saw in pure competition, except in pure competition, we actually ended up where price was equal to the minimum ATC, and that is not happening here. So price will equal ATC, but it will not equal minimum ATC. Here's an example that has numbers on it now. Before, we haven't been looking at any numbers. For this one, find the profit maximizing price, quantity, and solve for profit. Then decide if firms will enter or exit the industry, and draw on the graph what will happen. And remember, the demand curve will shift. So draw the new demand curve when firms either are entering or exiting this industry. So pause the video here. Our first step is to find where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So find those two cost curves and where they intersect. You move straight down, that will give you your quantity. So the quantity is 160. Then you need to move up to the demand curve to find the price. So move along here, that'll give you the price of 16. Now to solve for profit, we're going to take the price, which we said was 16, subtract average total cost. So to find average total cost, stay on the quantity that they're producing and go straight up until you hit the ATC curve here. And that will tell you the average total cost looks like 13. Multiply by the quantity of 160. And you will get 480. So the firm is making an economic profit of $480. Will firms enter or exit the industry? If profit is positive, then firms will enter. Now, when more firms enter the industry, that means that this one firm that we're looking at will have to share the demand with more firms in the industry. So their portion of the demand curve will decrease. So you'll get a new demand curve that has shifted down and to the left. So it may look something like this. So you should have a new demand curve. You can label it as D2 that is shifted down and to the left. Now we're going to dig a little deeper into monopolistic competition and efficiency. The first thing to know is that monopolistic competition is inefficient. So it doesn't achieve either productive efficiency or allocative efficiency. So remember from chapter 11 when we talked about this, productive efficiency is producing the good in the least costly way. That will happen when price is equal to minimum ATC. In monopolistic competition, price is greater than minimum ATC. Let's take a look at the graph. So here we're looking at a graph of monopolistic competition in long-run equilibrium. I can tell it's in long-run equilibrium because the demand curve is just barely touching the ATC. So no one's making any profit in this industry. So if we are producing at this point right here, this is the price, this is P3, but our minimum ATC is happening right here. They've labeled it as A4. Notice that the price is here, minimum ATC is lower. So this firm will not have productive efficiency. Now let's talk about allocative efficiency. Allocative efficiency is producing the right mix of goods or the right amount of the product. And that happens where price is equal to marginal cost. In monopolistic competition, price is greater than marginal cost. So notice at our profit maximizing point right here, the price will be here at P3, but marginal cost is way down here. So price is greater than marginal cost, which means there's actually an underallocation of resources, and the firm does not have the allocative efficiency. Allocative efficiency would actually happen if price is equal to marginal cost. That's right here on the graph. Remember, price comes from the demand curve. Here's marginal cost. So this intersection right here, it's not actually labeled on this graph. That would be our allocatively efficient point. The next thing I want to discuss, which goes hand in hand with the inefficiency that we see in monopolistic competition, is called excess capacity. Excess capacity is the plant and equipment that is underused because firms produce less than minimum ATC. So we're comparing it to the productive efficiency point, and we'll be able to see that the quantity is too low, and the excess capacity, we're actually going to be solving for excess capacity, is the difference in the quantity that they're actually producing at and the quantity that would give them the productive efficiency. So let's take a look at the graph again. To solve for excess capacity from the graph, the first thing you want to find is the point at which they're producing to maximize profit, which we already decided was right here, and take a look at the quantity. So this firm is producing at Q3. The next point you need to find is the point where productive efficiency happens. That's at minimum ATC. So the lowest point on the ATC curve, it's actually where marginal cost runs through it, so it's easy to find. This point right here, move down and see what the quantity is. So that to achieve productive efficiency, they should be producing quantity 4, but they're only producing quantity 3. If you subtract these two numbers, find the difference between the two, that is the excess capacity. So in the last chapter in Monopoly, we talked about how the government can come in and help fix the problem of inefficiency that happens in monopoly. But that's not something that happens in monopolistic competition. We know there's some inefficiency that happens, but there's also a trade-off to that inefficiency, and that is greater choice. So we're talking about all the variety of products that are made in monopolistic competition. So there's actually this trade-off between consumer choice and productive efficiency. The greater choices that we have as far as product variety, there will be greater excess capacity. So this is one example where it may be better for the government to not get involved in inefficiency in a market, because in monopolistic competition, we're going to see lots of benefits. So we'll see constant product development and improvements that are going to give us better brands, better quality, lots more types, lots more styles. There are also going to be a lot of advertising to try to get the information about the new products as well. So we're going to try one last problem, and this will dig a little deeper into excess capacity and the efficiencies. So we're looking at a monopolistic competition, a single firm here, and they are in long-run equilibrium because the demand curve is hitting ATC just at that one point. What you want to do is find the profit maximizing price and quantity first, solve for the firm's excess capacity, find the allocative efficiency point and notice the price there, find the productive efficiency point and find the quantity at that point. So pause the video here and try this. First thing, to find the profit maximizing price and quantity, we want to find on the graph where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, which is right here. You go straight down from that point. That will give you the profit maximizing quantity, 2.5, and move straight up from there to the demand curve, and you will find the profit maximizing price. So profit maximizing price is 40 and quantity is 2.5. Now to find excess capacity. We're going to compare the quantity that they're currently producing at, which is 2.5, to the quantity that would give us productive efficiency. And this is actually what part D is asking us. What's the quantity that would result in productive efficiency? So let's find that first. Remember, productive efficiency is where minimum ATC. So this right here is the minimum ATC. Just move straight down from there, and you'll find the quantity that would result in productive efficiency. So our quantity for productive efficiency is 4.5. To solve for excess capacity, you're just going to take the quantity of productive efficiency, subtract the quantity that they're producing to maximize profit, and you will get excess capacity is 2. And this is in units of what they're producing. Now, let's look at allocative efficiency. Remember, allocative efficiency is where the price equals marginal cost. So you want to find where the demand curve, that's what tells you price, hits marginal cost, which is this point right here. And it's asking you for price, so just move straight over and you'll find the price is 25. So notice what happens in monopolistic competition. Instead of having a lower price at allocative efficiency, this type of industry ends up charging a higher price. And with quantity, instead of having a higher quantity that would give us productive efficiency, these firms produce a lower quantity. So monopolistic competition achieves neither type of efficiency.